New York, I love you, but you're bringing me down. New York, I love you, but you're bringing me down. Like a rat in a cage, pulling minimum wage. New York, I love you, but you're bringing me down. New York, you're safer, and you're wasting my time. Our records all show you were filthy but fine.
Headlong tries to do work that's politically engaged and modern and contemporary, and has, I suppose, a kind of real edge for the things that other theatre companies aren't talking about as much. And we'd felt for a while, I suppose, that 9/11 was one of those issues, and that there was a kind of taboo that had built up around it.
New York, you're perfect, oh please don't change a thing.
For me, the relationship of theatre to 9/11 as an event, I guess, crystallised around the idea that the time lapse between the first plane hitting and the second tower falling was roughly the length of most plays, and probably close to the length of a Greek tragedy, and it had an Aristotelian idea of a kind of unity of place and time globally, that the whole world was looking at one place for a continuous amount of time, and that is, I suppose, what theatre aspires to achieve. I also think that theatre can be politically provocative.
I think you should leave slowly once this bit's begun, if we do this bit. So keep it through Charlotte's piece, then leave, and then you can be either down on the couch, until the next bit.
Being a piece of theatre, there's a danger that it's sort of blindly sort of left-wing, you know, Bush is terrible, you know, so the sort of received wisdoms about these things, and so I think Rupert really isn't or didn't want to be scared of being provocative about it, but obviously, but not insensitive, you know.
There's always a taste question. That's the difficulty, is how far do you go in presenting something, or presenting a particular person's view or a particular character's view, and not offend somebody. And hopefully nothing that we do is going to be offensive. People might not agree, you know, with particular writers or particular characters' viewpoints, but we're not setting out to offend. We're setting out to just explore how 9/11 has affected the past decade in various forms.
Good morning, good morning, good morning.
As soon as you mention 9/11, people in a sort of desperate way want to tell you what they were doing on the day. It's a sort of weird impulse people have about 9/11. They say, I remember this is what I was up to. And the idea of multiple narratives, that we all found ourselves on that day doing different things and think about that day through our own personal narrative, combined with the sort of babel of opinions, quickly made me feel that we were never going to do justice to it with a single voice.
I love you, love you, love you, love you. Ouch. Good morning. Good morning.
Honestly, I swear it'll get there.
Yeah.
It really will.
All these voices disagreeing and overlapping and fighting each other to talk about the event was the initial idea, and we then kind of replicated that in two development workshops, one in the UK and one in the US. In the UK, we invited a whole load of emerging writers to come and work with us to write a piece for the production, with the kind of carrot that if it was good, we'd perform it and then develop it in the production.
It was a relatively interesting opening to the whole process because we'd sort of been kept in the dark. So the first reactions were sort of quite incendiary, and then Rupert very much kind of coaxed us into areas where we could be a little bit more politically interesting or just a little bit less knee-jerk about the whole thing. which was fun. Like, it ended up being something that felt like it didn't have any barriers, which for a topic like this wasn't what I expected.
There was a lot of things that came from having a room full of Americans and a lot of New Yorkers actually talking about 9/11 that have really made their way into the show. Talking about a kind of sense of fatigue in America, a sense of it being so much of a kind of political football for all different sides of the political spectrum. So there'd been a sense that there'd been a lot of talk about 9/11, but actually not a lot of meaning or conclusion, or, no one felt there'd been any great 9/11 art. And we talked a lot about hair as a kind of response to Vietnam. And there's actually loads of really great art came out of Vietnam or out of World War I, and we kind of said, well, 10 years is quite a long time, actually, for the world's artists to respond to a major event. And actually, with 9/11, that hasn't happened. Why is it that hasn't happened? Why is it that you guys didn't want to respond?
There was also kind of a visual thing that I found when I'm in New York. When you see a large building like the Empire State Building or the old Twin Towers, you might see it very clearly down an avenue or across street, and then lose it as you move through the block, and then see it again a bit later down the block, but from a slightly different angle. And it's actually very hard in New York to see architecture in the way that we do in London, where everyone can see St Paul's. You see it as a vista. And the idea that New York and the towers themselves were sort of born of these sort of little shards, and closure, and then another little window, and then closure, seemed to indicate a form that might be interesting that way as well.
He's commissioned a wide variety of writers. They're not just playwrights, historians, journalists, and so on, novelists. And I don't know what the result is going to be, but presumably he wanted a broad canvas of perspectives, and he decided not to have one authorial voice.
I think it's a brilliant idea, because, of course, so many different people were affected by 9/11. I think it's an immense task, sort of quite daunted just contributing, 10 or 15 minutes. But to for one writer to kind of take on that job themselves, I think it's more interesting to approach it in the way that Rupert is doing, to get all those different voices, because, it has changed the world. That's a lot of people.
We talked about it, and we thought, well, maybe I would have some editorial input, being obsessed with both what actually happened on the day and the kind of lessons one might now be brooding on. And then I thought, what is the point? Just being kind of consultant, really. At least have a crack at actual stage writing.
Voices from both sides of the pond, voices from all different age groups as well, which is something I really, really miss as a writer. We have a real fetishism with youth at the moment, and largely if I do anything collaborative, it's all of us, under the age of 30. And to get different voices from different generations and to be part of something with people that are some real heroes of mine, is really, really exciting.
It's massively challenging and at the same time really exciting. And I can't really speak for the actors. I suspect the actors may be less delighted by the fact that they have to constantly learn new versions of the script, and we constantly keep changing the dances and moving things around. And it is intellectually exhausting, I think. It's like kind of playing a 6-week game of mental chess, where you're constantly saying, right, if I move that piece now, then 5 moves later, this is going to happen. And if I put that piece there in that half, then the following piece can't go there because it's got that actor in it, or because it's too similar thematically, or because then we're going to want to crescendo to an ending.
Some pieces I haven't even seen. To a certain degree, during rehearsal, you're kind of beavering away with your sort of bit of the jigsaw puzzle, trusting that Rupert is sort of drawing it all into something that sort of hangs together.
What's going to work with what's going to impact next to something else in the right way? What flavour have we had? What flavour can come next?
Lots of it is very contradictory, and so something needs to obviously draw that together, and I think the movement is what will hopefully do that.
Yeah, and I think it needs to have more sound. The sound design needs to reflect transport.
Yeah. Luckily, working with Rupert, he's a director who really enjoys watching movement. And a lot of directors don't, actually. They see it as a bit of a necessary evil. Rupert really values it as part of the palette of telling a story, to create a mood. Sometimes you can say things through abstracted movement that might be a little bit unpalatable. So to kind of do it as a direct address, he allows me quite a lot of free rein.
Need to relook at that one.
One round up the stairs, then can we keep underscoring underneath?
Yeah, absolutely.
Go along there.
Yeah, I'd always felt that the 2 planes come into the two towers, and the towers go down and then detonate, and that boom, boom, explosion produced all these other narratives into Iraq and Afghanistan and personal lives and private lives and the political arena, and so the sense of sort of people running from the event, literally on the day, but also over the following 10 years, was an image that had always been in my head, and it reminded me particularly of the work of Pina Bausch, who's a choreographer I admire a lot, and how she often has troops of choric characters on journeys pursuing each other, often with repetitive motion, and I thought it'd be really exciting to do a sort of politicised version of Pina Bausch show in the space. And so the choreographic elements of the piece became like a memory of 10 years, a dream of 10 years, rather than a narrative or an argument.
I think it really does give the audience a little bit of a breather sometimes between quite a lot of heavy information and some quite disturbing and upsetting verbatim speeches. I think it's good to have these other colours and also to get a little bit of the flavour of the music of the time.
801, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 801.
The show is a kind of a total mix of different ingredients, both thematic and formal and emotional. And so you have some pieces that respond to the event more emotionally, like Matthew Lopez's piece about the three widows who meet on every anniversary, which is also kind of formally interesting, told backwards in time.
Don't beat yourself up. She beats herself up. You made a decision, a healthy decision. You went to Paris with your sister instead of this shitty little coffee shop. Bravo, sweetie. Have a baguette and pretend you're there now.
I'm here now.
We're all here now.
Yes.
You have pieces that are more formal in stance, so Rory Malarkey's piece about travel paranoia, which is just these three kind of disembodied voices, the three actors also reading a series of announcements.
If you're so high up, you're dead anyways. Doesn't matter if it's, engine failure or...
A whooshing sound, like everything expanding and contracting suddenly.
A hole in the side sucking everything through.
Is located under the seat in front of you.
Then that darkness and the bowels...
Multiple nationalities scattered all over the square.
So maybe it would be better to just push myself against another, allow the force and shock of it to crush my organs entirely.
Hostesses don't even look at me. Cool.
Yeah,
that's a different thought now.
That's brave.
That's full stop.
Nice.
Mike Bartlett's piece obviously is formally incredibly daring and brave and interesting, and also tells a really interesting story.
What was she? To you?
No.
To you, Andy?
She was...
A friend?
I don't...
You knew her?
She was good.
A good?
Yeah.
Good friend?
Good girl.
Good girl?
No.
And you knew her from what? School?
No.
College?
No.
What?
Why?
Just a friend?
Yeah.
Not a...
No.
You and her?
No.
You didn't?
No.
Ever?
Alongside something like Lynn Nottage's piece, which looks at the racial aspects, the kind of racial tension, much more naturalistic scene, much more soulful scene.
What do you mean we done?
All you Silent Lake speaking dudes, you know what I'm talking about. Allah make y'all do some crazy shit.
I better not know what you're talking about. This has nothing to do with Allah.
All I'm saying is I understand why she did it. I don't make it right. But I know that kind of anger can make you do some evil. No disrespect, no offense, but if I'd have seen you on Tuesday,
You'd what?
I'd have told you some shit.
Hey, look. This, what happened, has nothing to do with us. We have nothing to do with these people. Al-Qaeda, jihadists. These are unreasonable people. They want life in the dark ages. What can I tell you?
I'm just saying, Ali, it's your people.
Hopefully part of the experience of the show will be that you'll enjoy that sort of taster menu effect, if you know what I mean. You'll get sort of short bursts of lots of different, interesting, contrasting forms, ideas, arguments, responses to the event.
There's something about the responses to 9/11 that all ought to be honoured, from the very trivial and the mundane and the quotidian. There's a play by Lynn Nottage, which is just really a row between a kind of coffee stall owner and one of their usual clients. And that's really perfectly describes actually how mighty historical events play into shop corner street situations.
I just run a grocery store. I don't ask for this. Have I ever done anything to you or to anyone else to deserve this? You sold me sour milk. The milk wasn't sour when you bought it. Yo, but it is now.
It was looking great. It was really good. Isn't it like the sour milk, though, has to be weak? What's the one before that? He says, I didn't do anything wrong.
Have I ever done anything to you or to anyone else to deserve this?
You sold me sour milk.
Isn't he going, I'm still angry about 9/11?
in a way. It's still so even if it's small, it still needs to be. I still don't know if I like you, and your attitude, your racist attitude, and so that heat needs to keep there until the third number, doesn't it?
Usually on a production, of course, you've got one character, so you follow that character's story, you follow their through line, and you can invest a lot more in that character and allow that character to sort of enter your body and for you to move towards that character and for that to be your only focus. Whereas on this project, obviously you've got 10 characters, so they're all sort of shouting. They're all shouting inside you. They've all got different demands, and so you're sort of spinning plates slightly in terms of moving between the characters.
It's kind of like an actor's dream in a way. I think I'm doing 5 or 6 characters. Rupert very clearly said yesterday that we're not allowed wigs. I've kind of been banking on a wig to at least sort of differentiate, and he said, no, we're going to be in a basic choric costume, which we can add bits and bobs to, but it's going to be about character.
Death is quiet, and there is nothing to do.
It's being called an immersive theatrical experience. I didn't know what that meant at all until we got here, actually, into this space, and which is completely empty, as you can see, but it's not going to be empty. They're transforming it into something.
By the nature of it not being in a theatre, it being in a very corporate kind of space, a business space, a space that used to be a trading floor, in an area of London that isn't really associated with theatre. They're coming in through the sort of doors which you'd normally know when you're at work, and all those things maybe will take people out of their sort of habitual expectations.
They're all around you, and so your energy has got to be going in many different directions. When you're in proscenium march theatre, your energy is often going directly out in front of you, whereas here suddenly people are behind you, people are underneath you almost, because sometimes you're standing on a table or you're delivering from a high viewpoint, from a corridor up above the stage, and some real awareness that you have to have of where your audience is first and foremost. And I think that really plays into how the scenes are played.
Lesson time. What have we learned? Horror at the evil men can do? Too banal? Time to get the perspective that distance lends. Well, yes, all entirely reasonable. Trouble is, I'm not.
Simon Chalmers' piece is a monologue written for a narrator who kind of bears some similarity to Simon Chalmers, I suppose, and is for the large part is about that kind of frustration in trying to talk about the event, but also in being asked to talk about the event in terms of history. And of course he asks and I think makes a gesture towards, in some way, answering what is the question of the show, which is what did it mean?
I was and am constantly being asked, as the character who is sort of my voice says, about how historic is it then, which is sort of, a very self-evident question. And I suppose I had in mind a slightly cantankerous Royal Court 60s playwright kind of style temper, and saying, well, what am I, a magnitude meter then? So I wanted a little bit of kind of frontal, irritable rhetoric, with a sense of actually how a historian feels when he's in the grip, not of history as written, but history as unfolding in front of him. So that's one kind of voice. The second kind of voice was very much more personal, about what it felt like on the day and the days after, where you're not at all remotely interested in the historian. You're interested in how your kids are and how your wife, who was driving to Manhattan to work that day, was.
So, how historic is it then? That's what they kept on asking me 10 years ago. Magazines, radio, papers, over and over again. Does it feel really, truly historic? Will we look back on it and say, well, we are, aren't we? Isn't that why you're all here? Bald facts not enough for you after all this time? Well, what am I, some kind of magnitude meter? Well, since you're asking, I'd say it fits the bill, wouldn't you? bona fide historical enormity, up there with the uber baddies. Sarajevo, 1914, Black Death, Fall of Constantinople, Assassination of Lincoln, Treblinka, you name them, ticks all the turning point boxes. Life not the same after, never will be, fate of the world irrevocably changed, beginning of the end of something, end of the beginning of something else.
I've been very preoccupied with finding something to think about in this 10th anniversary that goes beyond personal grieving and goes beyond the other thing that's happening. It's a sort of knee-jerk default anti-Americanism that results out of 2 wars and the standard, broadsheet opinion-making, get over it, we've learned what an incompetent thug America is. And my passion is in, well, there still is an issue here about what was the reason for the attack. And there is something to say to the kind of jihadi mentality, which is about the wiping out of cities like our own, which are the kind of places where free creative thought of the kind that produces a play like Decade. Can you imagine having the temerity to do something like that in Tehran now? I don't think so. So you can hear me getting on my high horse now. I'm very keen that people should think about the fragility of tolerant societies.
And every single dead people will cover their heads on the hand. And they will say to Allah, ask him, why did he kill me? Why did he kill me in this day in the world? But they have to answer, why do people kill? So it's very, very strong.
With the verbatim, you've literally got someone's voice in your ears, which you're listening to, and then 2 seconds later you're speaking, imitating exactly how they do it. And that's a very interesting exercise, because what you find is that the more accurately you deliver that imitation, the more you find yourself being affected by the voice physically. And suddenly, out of nowhere, this character appears that you don't even realize. You've made no conscious decision to play. All you've done is faithfully follow the words.
I make verbatim plays, which means I record interviews with people, which I just audio, so I don't film them, and I then edit the interviews into a structure, and those edited interviews become the text of the play, so I don't add anything, although the interviews are obviously significantly edited. In performance and in rehearsal, the actors wear earphones and they hear the exact words through the earphones, and they copy it precisely with every ah, stutter, hesitation, cough, so that you get a very kind of precise portrayal of the real-life person.
Because what happened after 9/11 is the amount of Muslims in the world is increased. You look in America now, 15,000 Muslims a year, and there's 10 million Muslim. And in Britain, it's nearly 2 million Muslim. You know why? And 9/11 gave people to research more about Islam. You got my point. People are thinking, who are the people who are bombing our building? So let me search about the religion. Is it really the religion? It make people like curious. People want to know. So they gave them a purpose. They gave opportunity to others. You understand? You got my point.
I have one piece which is a direct address to the audience, which is really a sort of almost verbatim, a personal account of someone who worked in the building in the South Tower and was not at work that day and witnessed it from his living room.
He was a systems analyst for a bank, and he was responsible for shutting down all the systems because the Port Authority had decided that there needed to be a power down for some security work on the weekend.
Our building is transformed into sand. It goes like this. This sandcastle falling down. And Bernard and I, both of us, kind of at the same time say, what did we do at the weekend? Like, what the hell did I do? I felt guilty.
Scott is not a conspiracy theorist, but obviously when this tragedy happened, because that event was so fresh in his mind, he had some questions, and his story really is about how he has been trying to get confirmation of that power down on those floors in the South Tower that weekend over the past 10 years, and he has found that effort very, very frustrating and hasn't been able to get the answers that he wants. And he's also found himself caught up in a particular world of people who do believe that there are lots of big unanswered questions about 9/11, and people who don't believe that. And he doesn't really have a particular view or take any particular side, but his personal experience is that something happened which he feels needs answering. So I just wanted to give voice to that.
There was no power, therefore all those doors are open. You know, so conceivably access to those building spaces could have been a risk. Now, you know, I don't say that I believe this, but these outrageous ideas that are there.
This is going to be an absolutely amazing evening of theatre. Hard, moving, exciting, really different, and really thought-provoking.
There's a word we use a lot in the workshops, possibly too much, which was provocative, and we kept saying, we really want the work to make you think about things, or to make you angry about things, or, you know, not to just leave you sitting there quietly, so that in some way, when you come out of our show about 9/11, you come out different to how you went in, even if it's just more annoyed that we haven't said what you wanted us to say.
We're lucky in this country that, you know, a company like ours is subsidised, so we don't answer to any commercial body, and so we can take really whatever political or personal stance we see as appropriate to the material. And I think for an issue as complex as the legacy of 9/11, that's something that theatre can do more quickly and more challengingly than maybe the screen can.
It's true to the way theatre was in Shakespeare's time. You know, stir it up, re-scramble it. Do something movies and television can't do. Have a bash at, you know, the play of voices. And it's really thrilling. It's what Brecht wanted, it's what Pirandello wanted, it's what Beckett wanted. It says the theatre is alive and could deliver something to an audience face-to-face in an evening that nothing in our smoothed-out digital world is capable of. So I do want to throw roses or whatever at him for that. It's in great British tradition, it really is. So, you know, bravo to that.